My ex-wife's new husband, a corrupt police detective, and his crew entered my bar. Nice place. Your 55% profits are ours now, or we plan enough evidence to put you away forever. I told him, this is a mistake. He laughed. Are you resisting arrest? I dialed a single number. You have 90 seconds to get out. He scoffed. 80 seconds later, he stared in horror as, look, I've always had a thing for that bar door. Not in a weird way, but in the way you appreciate a good pair of jeans or a coffee pot that doesn't betray you at 6 in the morning. The door had this little squeak, nothing dramatic, just a friendly chirp that said, hey, someone's here, without being obnoxious about it. And the light? Man, the light that spilled through when someone opened it was like a lazy cat stretching across the hardwood, all golden and warm and completely unbothered by the world's nonsense. That door had personality, which is more than I could say for most of the people who walked through it on a Tuesday night. But the night Raymond Hale decided to grace my establishment with his presence, that door sounded like it had been kicked open by bad luck, wearing steel-toed boots and carrying a grudge. I'm not even exaggerating. The squeak turned into this long, protesting groan, like the hinges themselves were saying, oh hell no, not this guy. The light didn't spill in. It practically threw itself across the floor and died there, dramatic as a soap opera actress who just discovered her evil twin. Raymond moved like he already owned the city, which I guess technically he kind of did, seeing as how he had a badge and a severely inflated sense of his own importance. His badge was half tucked into his belt like he couldn't decide whether he wanted to intimidate people or seduce them, and his gun glinted under my carefully curated mood lighting in a way that screamed, I'm compensating for something, but let's not talk about therapy. But it was his smile that really sold the whole package. This wide, toothy grin that said he genuinely enjoyed watching other people's misfortune the way normal humans enjoy watching puppies play in snow. He wasn't alone, because guys like Raymond never are. He had a crew with him, 4 guys squeezed into cheap leather jackets that were trying so hard to be intimidating but really just looked like they'd been shoplifting from a Spirit Halloween clearance rack. One of them had a neck tattoo of a scorpion that was so badly done it looked more like an angry shrimp. Another one kept cracking his knuckles like he'd seen it in a movie and thought it made him look tough. But really he just seemed like he had arthritis and poor life choices. My regulars? Oh, they froze up like fish on a dock at noon in July. Dead silent, eyes wide, drinks halfway to their mouths in this perfect tableau of, oh crap, is this actually happening? Old Eddie, who normally couldn't shut up about his fantasy football league even if you paid him, suddenly discovered the fascinating intricacies of his beer label. Rita, who'd been laughing at something on her phone 3 seconds earlier, went completely still like a deer that just heard a twig snap in hunting season. Even the jukebox, and I swear I'm not making this up, coughed once, sputtered like it was choking on its own song, and went completely quiet. The universe itself was holding its breath. Raymond crossed the floor like he was walking a red carpet, his cheap cologne arriving a full 3 seconds before he did. He leaned on my counter. My counter, the one I'd spent 2 weekends refinishing because I actually give a damn about craftsmanship, and ran his hand over the wood like he was auditioning for the role of man who ruins good things just because he can. His fingers left little smudge marks on the polish, and I died a little inside. Nice place, he said, and his teeth were all showing in that smile that wasn't really a smile so much as a threat wearing a costume. Real cozy. Real profitable, I bet. I didn't say anything. I've learned over the years that sometimes the best response is none at all, especially when dealing with people who clearly rehearsed their villain monologue in the bathroom mirror that morning. He leaned in closer, and I could smell the combination of bad decisions and expensive whiskey on his breath. Here's how this is gonna work, Ward. Your 55% profits? They're ours now. Monthly. In cash. Unmarked bills would be nice, but we're not picky. He paused, letting that number hang in the air like a bad smell. Or, and this is option B, we plan enough evidence in this little establishment to put you away forever. Evidence is funny like that. It just shows up sometimes, you know? In the damnedest places. 55%. The number sounded like arithmetic and a death threat had gotten together and had a baby, and that baby grew up to be an accountant with sociopathic tendencies. I took a slow sip of my drink. Bourbon, neat, because I'm not an animal, and let the silence stretch out between us like taffy. This is a mistake, I said, my voice calm as a bedtime story about bunnies and rainbows. Raymond laughed, actually threw his head back and laughed like I'd just delivered the punchline to his absolute favorite joke. His crew joined in, a chorus of hyenas who probably didn't even get what was funny but knew their cue when they heard it. A mistake. Raymond wiped an imaginary tear from his eye. The only mistake here is thinking you have a choice, buddy. So what's it gonna be? Partnership or prison? Door number 1 or door number 2? He leaned back, supremely confident, one hand resting on his gun like it was a comfort blanket. Behind him, his cheap leather crew stood there trying to look menacing, and honestly, they were doing an okay job if you squinted and had never actually met anyone genuinely scary. Are you resisting arrest? Raymond asked, his grin getting wider. Because I can make that happen right now. I got witnesses. My guys here will swear you attacked me. It'll be a whole thing. Paperwork, court dates, orange jumpsuits, the works. I reached into my pocket slowly, didn't want anyone getting twitchy, and pulled out my phone. I pressed one number. Just one. Speed dial is a beautiful thing when you plan ahead. The call connected, and I said, calm as Sunday morning, loud enough for everyone to hear. You've got 90 seconds to get out. Raymond's grin faltered for just a second, like a light bulb flickering before it dies. What? 90 seconds? I repeated, glancing at my watch. Actually, 89 now. Time flies when you're committing extortion. He scoffed, puffing his chest out like a pigeon who'd just discovered steroids. You threatening me? You threatening a police officer? That's bold. That's stupid, but it's bold. I didn't answer. Just sipped my bourbon and watched the seconds tick by on my watch. Somewhere in the background, the jukebox was still silent, holding its breath right along with everyone else. You're bluffing, Raymond said, but his voice had lost some of its swagger. His crew shifted uncomfortably, expensive leather creaking. 80 seconds later, the first distant siren started wailing, getting closer. Raymond's grin disappeared completely, replaced by something that looked an awful lot like a man realizing he was the punchline after all. People always get this weird look on their faces when I tell them I built this place with my pension and stubbornness. Like I just told them I won the lottery or robbed a bank or discovered a treasure map in my grandma's attic. Nope, nothing that exciting. Just 23 years of grinding it out as a construction foreman, saving every penny I didn't absolutely need to spend on rent and reasonably priced beer, and deciding that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to own something that wasn't covered in someone else's bad decisions. My name is Liam Ward, and if that sounds boring and completely unmemorable, well, congratulations on being perceptive. I'm not the guy who walks into a room and makes everyone turn their heads. I'm the guy who's already in the corner nursing a drink and watching everyone else make fools of themselves, taking mental notes for later. I spent my entire adult life pouring concrete and late nights and cheaper-than-cheap coffee into other people's buildings, watching other people's dreams take shape, while mine sat in a savings account gathering interest at a rate that would make a snail look ambitious. The bar, Ward's Tavern, because I'm incredibly creative with names, took me 3 years to build. Not literally build, because I'm not that much of a masochist, but 3 years from, hey, wouldn't it be nice to own a bar, to actually turning the key in the lock on opening night and thinking, holy hell, I actually did this. I found the space in a neighborhood that was trying really hard to be trendy, but hadn't quite figured it out yet. You know the type? Couple of vintage clothing stores, a coffee shop where the barista judges your order, a yoga studio that smells like desperation and patchouli. The previous owner had run it into the ground the way you'd expect someone to run a bar into the ground when they think business plan is something other people worry about. The place was called Shots and Thoughts, which should tell you everything you need to know about the guy's decision-making skills. When I took over, there were still motivational posters on the walls with eagles and sunsets and words like synergy in fonts that screamed 2003. I burned those posters, had a little ceremony and everything. Eddie, who'd eventually become a regular, helped me, and we toasted with cheap champagne that tasted like carbonated regret. I gutted the place, refinished everything, and turned it into something that actually felt like a bar instead of a corporate retreat for people having midlife crises. I wanted exposed brick and warm lighting and a jukebox that played actual good music instead of whatever algorithmic nightmare the kids are into these days. I wanted a place where you could come in, sit down, and feel like you weren't being judged for ordering whiskey at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday because, Let's be honest, Tuesdays are garbage, and we all know it. The bar gave me a rhythm I didn't know I needed. Regulars started showing up. Eddie with his fantasy football obsession, Rita with her terrible Tinder dates that she'd narrate like true crime podcasts, Marcus who worked nights at the hospital and needed somewhere quiet to decompress before going home to his 3 kids who apparently never slept. There were jokes, the honest clink of glasses, the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every second with noise. It was good. It was really damn good. I didn't expect my life to include divorce papers and insults. But hey, life is a messy playlist that someone else is controlling, and sometimes they've got terrible taste in music. Sophie. Let's talk about Sophie, because you can't understand why I did what I did without understanding her. Sophie Romano. Well, Sophie Hale now, but we'll get to that nightmare. Used to sit at stool 3 back when we were married. Stool 3, right at the end of the bar where she could watch me work and pretend not to care if I burned dinner or forgot to pick up milk or committed any of the other tiny domestic crimes that apparently add up over time until someone decides they're done. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made me feel like I was constantly underdressed for my own life. Dark hair, sharp wit, the kind of smile that could make you forget you were supposed to be mad about something. She worked in real estate. Commercial properties, the kind of deals that involved a lot of zeros and men in suits who said things like, "Let's circle back on that," without any sense of irony. She was good at it too. Ambitious. Driven. All those words people use when someone wants more than what they currently have and isn't afraid to step on a few toes to get there. We were happy, I think. Or maybe we were just comfortable, and I couldn't tell the difference because I'm an idiot who thought good enough was the same as good. She'd come to the bar after work, still in her power suit and heels that made her 3 inches taller, and she'd sit at stool 3 and tell me about her day. The difficult clients, the deals that fell through, the ones that didn't. I'd make her a gin and tonic, Tanqueray, never the cheap stuff, extra lime, and listen. Sometimes I'd contribute something useful. Mostly I'd just nod and wipe down glasses and feel grateful that someone like her had chosen someone like me. Turns out gratitude isn't the same as enough. She left me for ambition and a man with a badge and what I can only describe as a private jet of moral bankruptcy. Raymond Hale. Yeah, that Raymond Hale. The same one who just walked into my bar, trying to shake me down like some kind of discount movie villain. They met at some charity fundraiser thing. Cops and real estate developers schmoozing over champagne and pretending they cared about underprivileged youth or whatever cause was trendy that quarter. Raymond was already a detective then, already on his way up the ladder, already building his little empire of side deals and convenient friendships. Sophie called me on a Wednesday. Not even the decency of a Friday or a Monday. Just a random Wednesday in October when I was restocking the bar and thinking about what to make for dinner. She said we needed to talk, which is code for your life is about to get significantly worse. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. And she slid the divorce papers across the table like she was closing a real estate deal. Professional. Efficient. No tears, no drama. Just, I think we want different things, and you'll always be important to me, and other phrases people use when they're trying to convince themselves they're not the bad guy. 6 months later, I got a text. Midweek again, because apparently that's her thing. Raymond and I got married. Thought you should know. No details, no invitation to the wedding I definitely wouldn't have attended. Just a heads up, like she was letting me know she'd changed her phone plan. I thought I had closure. I really did. I threw myself into the bar, made jokes about being single again, told my customers funny stories about the divorce that made it sound like no big deal. Yeah, my ex left me for a cop. Guess she wanted someone who could legally carry a weapon. I just carry emotional baggage, which is apparently less impressive. People laughed. I laughed. Everyone laughed, and if the laughter felt a little hollow, well, nobody mentioned it. Turns out closure is something Raymond sells in bulk to people like him. Guilt with a 2-year warranty and an extended protection plan that doesn't actually protect you from anything. And when Raymond and his discount leather crew swaggered into my bar and tried to take it from me with threats and that insufferable grin, I decided to make their evening significantly more interesting than they planned. Here's the thing about catching a dirty cop. You don't do it on a whim, and you definitely don't do it because you're feeling petty about your ex-wife marrying the guy. I mean, the pettiness helps. It's like premium fuel for the revenge engine, but you need actual evidence. Real, Tangible, hold-up-in-court evidence. Not just a gut feeling that someone's a grade-A dirtbag with a badge and a superiority complex. You catch a guy like Raymond on spaghetti threads of paperwork and his own sloppy arrogance. And let me tell you, Raymond had arrogance in bulk, industrial quantities. The kind of confidence that comes from years of getting away with things because nobody bothered to look too close, or because the people who did look decided their careers were more important than doing the right thing. The first thread came from Jax. Jax Martinez is my buddy from way back. We did construction together before he discovered he had a brain for computers, and I discovered I had a tolerance for drunk people's stories. Jax is half genius and half coffee, and I'm not entirely convinced he has blood in his veins instead of cold brew. The guy lives in hoodies that cost more than my monthly beer budget, types about 900 words per minute, and has the kind of posture that makes chiropractors weep. He's also exactly the kind of person you want on your side when you need to dig through digital dirt. Jax pinged me on a random Thursday with a message that just said, "Yo, weird wire transfer, you busy?" I was restocking olives and wondering why anyone orders dirty martinis anymore. So no, I wasn't busy. We met at his apartment, which looked less like a living space and more like a server farm that occasionally housed a human. He had 6 monitors set up in an array that probably violated some kind of fire code, energy drink cans forming a small pyramid on his desk, and a cat named Algorithm who judged me from atop a gaming chair. So I was doing some freelance work, Jax started, which is code for I was poking around places I probably shouldn't be, but technically didn't break any laws. He pulled up a spreadsheet that made my eyes cross. And I found this transfer. 50 grand from a company called Triborough Solutions to an account under the name Patricia Mendez. Okay, I said, because that meant absolutely nothing to me. Patricia Mendez is the PTA president at Riverside Elementary. She's a substitute teacher. She drives a 2015 Honda Civic. She does not have 50 grand lying around. Jax took a sip of something that smelled like it could power a small aircraft. But you know who does have connections to Triborough Solutions? Raymond Hale. His cousin runs it. On paper, they do logistics consulting, which is business speak for we move things and don't ask questions. I felt something click in my brain, like a puzzle piece finding its spot. Can you trace where the money came from originally? Jax grinned, which is what he does when you ask him to do something mildly illegal that he's absolutely going to do anyway. Can birds fly? Can Rita make poor dating choices? Of course I can. While Jax did his digital archaeology, I reached out to Lana Prescott. Lana's a public defender who drinks coffee like it's oxygen, and she's trapped in a submarine that's running out of air. We met during a particularly ugly case a few years back, where one of my regulars got caught up in something stupid, and she got him out of it with the kind of legal maneuvering that would make TV lawyers jealous. She's sharp, cynical, perpetually exhausted, and has exactly zero patience for cops who think their badge makes them bulletproof. I caught her at her office, which looked like a paper factory had exploded, and then apologized by sending more paper. She was surrounded by case files, her hair in a messy bun held together by what appeared to be a pen, wearing a suit that had seen better days and probably better years. "Liam," she said without looking up from whatever document she was murdering with a highlighter. "If you're here to confess to something, I'm going to need more coffee first." "I need your brain," I said, sliding into the chair across from her desk that was occupied by approximately 7 folders. I moved them. She didn't care. My brain is currently trying to understand why prosecutors think circumstantial evidence is the same as actual evidence. But sure, what's up? I told her about Raymond's visit, about the shakedown, about the 55% that he wanted to carve out of my business like. He was entitled to it. I told her about the wire transfer Jax found, about Patricia Mendez, the PTA president, who suddenly had money she shouldn't have. Lana stopped highlighting. She looked up, and her eyes did that thing where they get sharp and focused like a hawk spotting a particularly stupid rabbit. "You're building a case." "I'm collecting information." "You're building a case," she repeated. "Do you know how hard it is to take down a cop? How airtight everything needs to be? That's why I'm talking to you." She sat back, tapping her highlighter against her chin. "You need more than one wire transfer. You need a pattern. You need documentation. You need witnesses who won't suddenly develop amnesia when a detective starts asking questions." She paused. "But if you're serious about this, I know some people." The people she knew turned out to be Miriam Chun and Tomas Rivera, 2 journalists who worked for different outlets, but apparently shared a hobby of sniffing around local corruption like bloodhounds on a particularly interesting trail. Miriam wrote for the Metro Daily, covering city politics and making politicians nervous. Tomas did investigative pieces for an online publication that had a smaller audience but bigger teeth. We met at a diner at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, because apparently, that's when journalists eat lunch if they eat lunch at all. Miriam was early 30s, with glasses that kept sliding down her nose and a notebook that was already half full with writing I couldn't read from across the table. Tomas was younger, maybe late 20s, with the kind of energy that suggested he'd consumed his body weight in espresso and was considering more. So, Miriam said, not wasting time on pleasantries. Lana says you have something on Raymond Hale. Maybe, I said, because I'm not an idiot who shows all his cards immediately. We've been looking at him for months. Tomas jumped in, pulling out his phone and scrolling through something. He's dirty. We know he's dirty. Everyone knows he's dirty. But he's careful. Really careful. Nothing sticks. What have you got? I asked. Miriam and Tomas exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations people have when they've worked together long enough. Then Miriam pulled out her own phone. There's a courier company called QuickShift Logistics. On paper, they move packages. In reality, they're moving things that packages shouldn't contain. We've been tracking them for 8 months. Raymond's connected? Raymond's got his fingerprints all over it, but through about 6 layers of shell companies and cousins and friends of friends, Tomas said. There's a car lease in his cousin's name. The same cousin who runs Triborough Solutions. There are shipments that mysteriously never left a warehouse, but somehow got marked as delivered. There are receipts that don't match up with inventory logs. Little lies, Miriam added, stacked like dominoes. Individually, they're nothing. Together, they're a pattern. And that's when I realized what I was actually doing. I wasn't just defending my bar. I was starting something bigger, something that could either expose a corrupt cop or blow up spectacularly in my face and take me down with it. I started collecting everything. Every scrap, every thread, every weird coincidence that Jax found in financial records or Lana discovered in court filings or Miriam and Tomas had already documented. Little lies, stacked like dominoes, and all I had to do was find the right one to push. Not because I'm noble, let's be clear about that. Not because I'm some crusading hero who believes in truth and justice and the American way. I started collecting evidence because I'm stubborn, petty, and because I own the kind of pride you can't sell on eBay or return for store credit. Raymond walked into my bar and tried to take it from me, tried to use his badge and his threats like they were currency that bought him whatever he wanted. And I decided that currency was about to become worthless. Revenge, I discovered over the course of about 3 weeks and several sleepless nights, is approximately 60% patience, 30% technology, and 10% convincing people you aren't a complete lunatic who's about to ruin his own life for the sake of proving a point. That math might not add up perfectly, but neither does most of life. So let's not get picky about it. The first order of business was turning my bar, my lovely, honest, hard-working bar, into something that resembled a surveillance operation run by someone who'd watched too many spy movies and had access to a credit card with a decent limit. I needed cameras. Not the obvious kind that scream, "You're being recorded, please behave," but the sneaky kind that blend into the background like they're part of the furniture. The kind that catch people being their authentic, terrible selves. Jax showed up on a Sunday when the bar was closed, carrying 2 duffel bags that looked like they contained either very expensive electronics or the components for building a small robot army. Knowing Jax, it could honestly go either way. He also brought Algorithm the cat, because apparently, the cat has separation anxiety, which I didn't even know was a thing cats could have. Okay, Jax said, dumping the bags on the bar and unzipping them to reveal a tangle of wires, tiny cameras, and equipment that looked vaguely illegal. We're going to turn this place into the most well-documented bar in the tri-state area. Big Brother wishes he had this kind of setup. I'm not trying to record my regulars picking their noses, I said, watching as he pulled out a camera the size of a quarter. I need to catch Raymond being Raymond. Yeah, corrupt cop, shakedown, classic villain behavior. I got it. Jax held up the tiny camera like it was the Hope Diamond. These bad boys are motion-activated, audio-enabled, and stream directly to a secure server that I'm setting up in my apartment. Which means you're paying my internet bill for the next 6 months, by the way. Fine, And my electricity bill, because this is going to draw some serious power. Jax, I'm kidding. Mostly. He grinned and started surveying the bar like a general planning an invasion. We'll put one behind the whiskey bottles. That top-shelf stuff nobody orders unless they're trying to impress a date. One in the light fixture above the bar. One over by the jukebox. Maybe one in the corner by the bathroom hallway. Catch people when they think nobody's watching. We spent the next 4 hours installing cameras in places I never would have thought to look. Jax worked with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for surgeons or people defusing bombs, occasionally muttering things about focal lengths and bit rates that went completely over my head. Algorithms supervised from atop the bar, knocking over a salt shaker at one point just to prove cats are agents of chaos. This is some serious paranoia-level stuff. Eddie said when he showed up early for Monday happy hour and caught me adjusting a camera hidden in a decorative beer stein on the shelf. Eddie's got a sixth sense for when something weird is happening, probably from years of playing fantasy football and developing conspiracy theories about injured quarterbacks. Spring cleaning, I said, which was possibly the worst lie I'd ever told. You're installing cameras. Very thorough spring cleaning. Eddie squinted at me, then at the cameras, then back at me. Does this have something to do with those cops who came in last week? Rita told me about it. Said they look like the kind of guys who peak in high school and never recover. Rita's got away with words. Rita's got away with terrible judgment, but she's not wrong about those guys. Eddie settled onto his usual stool. You getting into something over your head, Liam? Probably, I admitted, because there was no point lying to Eddie. The guy could smell bullshit from across a football field. But I'm getting into it on purpose, which I think makes it better. That makes it worse, actually. Well, it's too late now. I'm committed. Like, fully committed. The kind of committed where you can't back out without looking stupid. Eddie considered this, then nodded slowly. All right. You need help? You let me know. I know some guys. What kind of guys? The kind of guys who know guys. It's a whole network. Very complicated. Don't worry about it. I decided not to worry about it. Jax finished the installation by Tuesday and spent Wednesday setting up what he called the command center in his apartment. He sent me a video tour that made my head hurt. 6 monitors displaying different camera angles, a keyboard that lit up like a Christmas tree, and enough computing power to probably launch a satellite or hack into the Pentagon or whatever it is computers do these days when they're not showing me cat videos. The feed is encrypted, Jax explained over the phone while I pretended to understand what encryption actually meant. Everything's backed up to 3 different secure locations. If Raymond or his goons try to delete footage, they can't. It's like trying to unring a bell, except the bell is digital and also making copies of itself. You're a weird dude, Jax. Yeah, but I'm your weird dude, and you're paying me in cash, bad jokes, and that signed baseball you promised me. The signed baseball was from a Yankees player I'd met at a charity event about 8 years ago. I didn't even like baseball that much, but Jax did, so it seemed like a fair trade for potentially illegal surveillance equipment and enough technical expertise to make the NSA jealous. While Jax handled the tech side, I needed to handle the human side, which was significantly more complicated because humans are unpredictable and have feelings and occasionally principles. I needed people who could take what I collected and turn it into something that mattered. Evidence that would hold up not just in the court of public opinion, but in an actual court with an actual judge who'd actually send Raymond to actual prison. That's where Agent Marcus Ray came in. Agent Ray was FBI, federal, which meant he operated on a different level than local cops, and had exactly zero patience for local cops who made the entire profession look bad. Lana set up the meeting through some connection she had from law school, or a previous case, or possibly a Tinder date gone surprisingly well. I met him at a park at 7 in the morning because apparently, federal agents are morning people who enjoy ruining everyone else's sleep schedule. Ray looked exactly like what you'd expect an FBI agent to look like if you'd only ever seen FBI agents in movies. Clean cut, suit that probably cost more than my car, expression that suggested he'd seen some things and wasn't impressed by most of them. He was drinking coffee from a travel mug and feeding ducks, which felt weirdly wholesome for someone whose job involved catching criminals. Liam Ward, he said when I approached, not bothering with a handshake. You're the bartender building a case against Detective Raymond Hale. I'm the bartender who's tired of being shaken down by Detective Raymond Hale. I corrected. Building a case is more of a side hobby. Ray almost smiled. Almost. Lana speaks highly of you. Says you're stubborn and possibly insane, but surprisingly thorough. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. He tossed some more bread to the ducks, who were attacking it like they hadn't eaten in weeks. Here's the situation. I can't officially help you. Internal Affairs is already looking at Hale, but they're moving slow because everyone's afraid of stepping on toes. Politics, procedure, all that bureaucratic nonsense that lets guilty people stay free. So what can you do? I can be in the right place at the right time if someone were to provide credible evidence of an ongoing crime. He looked at me directly. Emphasis on credible. Emphasis on ongoing. You give me solid proof that Hale is actively committing a felony. I can move fast. Really fast. But it has to be airtight. No gaps. No questions. No room for his lawyer to wiggle through. I'm installing cameras. I didn't hear that. They're definitely not in my bar right now. Still not hearing anything. Ray finished his coffee. You get what you need, you call me. Day or night. I'll handle the rest. Back at the bar, Lana helped me organize everything into what she called legal scaffolding, which sounded impressive but really just meant putting things in folders with labels and making sure everything had dates and times and wasn't going to get thrown out because I'd violated chain of custody or some other legal concept I barely understood. Every file needs metadata, she explained, surrounded by printouts and post-it notes and enough highlighters to stock an office supply store. Every recording needs a timestamp. Every transfer needs a source document. We're building a story here, and stories need structure. I kept a master folder with everything. Wire transfers Jax traced, photos Miriam and Tomas had collected, receipts that didn't add up, timestamps of who went where when. I even made a playlist of jokes to lighten the mood if anyone started crying, because this whole operation was stressful enough without everyone having emotional breakdowns. By the time I was done, my bar looked the same but felt completely different. Every light fixture, every shelf, every corner had eyes. I was ready. Now I just needed Raymond to walk back in and be himself. Raymond Hale was greedy the way raccoons are greedy. Bright, shiny interest in anything labeled cash, or easy, or nobody will notice if this goes missing. He had that particular brand of arrogance that comes from getting away with things for so long that you start to believe you're invincible, like the universe itself has granted you some kind of special exemption from consequences. Which meant that all I had to do was dangle something shiny in front of him and watch him waddle over like a kid at a carnival heading straight for the cotton candy stand. The plan was simple, which is usually a good sign because complicated plans are where things go wrong and people end up accidentally setting themselves on fire or whatever. I needed Raymond to come back to the bar. I needed him to feel comfortable, confident, superior. I needed him to talk. And the best way to make someone like Raymond talk is to make him think he's already won. So I started a rumor. Not directly, because I'm not an amateur who announces his plans on a megaphone. No, I let it slip casually to Derek, one of my regulars who works in construction and has the unique distinction of knowing approximately everyone in a 10-block radius. Derek's the kind of guy who could tell you the life story of his mailman's cousin's dog groomer. He's a gossip, but the useful kind. The kind who spreads information faster than the internet and with about the same level of accuracy. Business has been good. I mentioned to Derek on a Thursday afternoon while he was nursing his second beer and complaining about his boss. Really good, actually. Been hosting some private events. Cash only. High rollers, you know? People who like their privacy. Derek's eyebrows went up so fast they nearly achieved liftoff. Cash only? Like, under the table? Like, people who prefer not to have their credit cards show up on statements that their wives might see. I said, which wasn't technically a lie because I had hosted exactly one bachelor party 6 months ago where the groom paid in cash because he was paranoid about his fiancée finding out about the stripper. There was no stripper. The guy was just paranoid. But Derek didn't need to know that. Damn, Liam. That's smart. You must be pulling in serious money. Let's just say I'm not worried about rent this month. I wiped down the bar like this was all very casual and not at all a carefully orchestrated performance. Or next month. Or the month after that. I watched Derek's brain work. Could practically see the gears turning as he calculated how long it would take him to tell this story to someone else. I gave it about 4 hours. He lasted 3. By Friday, at least 6 people had mentioned hearing about my exclusive cash events, with the kind of knowing wink that suggested they thought I was running an underground casino or a speakeasy for rich people with questionable ethics. By Saturday, Rita asked me if I was doing something illegal because if you are, that's hot. But also please don't go to prison because you make good drinks. I'm not doing anything illegal, I told her, which was true. I'm just letting people believe what they want to believe. That's basically the same thing as lying. It's strategically ambiguous truth-telling. You're going to get yourself killed, Rita said. But she said it fondly, the way you tell a friend they're an idiot, but you love them anyway. The fake ledger was Lana's idea, actually. She suggested I create a document that looked official enough to be believable, but fake enough that anyone with half a brain could tell it wasn't real. Except Raymond wouldn't look that closely, because people like Raymond don't look closely at things that confirm what they already want to believe. So I made a ledger. Used Excel, which I barely know how to use because I'm not a spreadsheet person. I listed a bunch of dates, some fictional events with names like Private Party, Johnson, and Corporate Mixer, Tech Startup, and numbers that seemed impressive but not so impressive that they'd be obviously fake. 10 grand here, 15 grand there, a $20,000 event that was supposedly some CEO's birthday party. Then I accidentally left it on the bar one evening when Derek was there, along with some other papers that made it look like I'd been sorting through paperwork and got distracted. I went to the back to grab something, came back exactly 90 seconds later, and the ledger was gone. Derek was looking at his phone with the kind of studied casualness that screamed, I definitely just took a photo of something I wasn't supposed to see. Find everything okay? I asked. Yeah, man. All good. Just checking my messages. Cool. Hey, you didn't see a blue folder, did you? Had some boring tax stuff in it. Nope. Didn't see anything. I gave it 48 hours. Raymond showed up on a Tuesday, which felt appropriate because Tuesdays are generally terrible, and this particular Tuesday was about to get significantly more interesting. He didn't bring his discount leather crew this time. Just himself and one other guy who looked like he'd been grown in a lab specifically to make people uncomfortable. The guy had dead eyes and a neck like a tree trunk and the kind of energy that suggested he enjoyed his job way too much. The cameras were rolling. Jax had texted me earlier. All systems go. I'm watching from home with popcorn. This is better than Netflix. Raymond settled onto a stool like he owned it, which I guess in his mind he did. He was wearing a nicer suit this time, like he'd decided to dress up for the occasion of ruining my life. His smile was all teeth and no warmth, a shark wearing human skin. Ward, he said, my name sounding like an insult in his mouth. Heard business is booming. Cash events. High-end clientele. That's impressive for a little dive bar in a neighborhood that's still trying to figure out if it's trendy or just gentrified. Business is fine, I said carefully, pouring myself a drink because I was going to need it. Fine. Word on the street is you're pulling in 30, 40 grand a month in cash. That's more than fine. That's successful. That's the kind of success that attracts attention. He leaned forward, elbows on my bar. The kind of attention that needs proper management. Protection, even. I've got insurance. Not that kind of protection. Raymond's smile widened. See, here's the thing about cash businesses. They're vulnerable. Lots of ways things can go wrong. Robberies, fires, surprise health inspections that find violations, tax audits that discover discrepancies. You follow. I follow that you're threatening me. I'm offering partnership. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful. You keep doing what you're doing. These cash events, these private parties, and we take our cut. Call it a consulting fee. Protection services. Business management. We're not greedy. 55% is more than fair. There it was. The same number from last time. Like he'd decided that 55 was his lucky percentage and he was sticking with it. 55%, I repeated. For what exactly? For making sure your business stays successful. For making sure certain people don't ask certain questions about where all that cash is going. Raymond gestured to his tree trunk companion. For making sure you don't have any accidents. You'd be surprised how many bar owners have accidents. I let him talk. God, did I let him talk? Raymond had the kind of ego that needed an audience, and once he got started, he couldn't stop. He bragged about his shell companies. Triborough Solutions handles all kinds of logistics. You'd be amazed what moves through there. And his cousins who signed papers faster than they chewed gum. No questions asked. He mentioned a shipment that had gone missing from a warehouse. How convenient it was when inventory records didn't match up with what actually got delivered. It's all about knowing how the system works, Raymond said, warming to his subject like a professor giving a lecture on corruption. People think it's hard to move money around, but it's easy if you know the right people. You set up an LLC under someone else's name. My cousin Patricia, sweet lady, substitute teacher, would never hurt a fly, and boom, you've got a clean account. You run transactions through 3 or 4 companies, keep everything under 10 grand so it doesn't trigger reports, and nobody notices. It's beautiful, really. Elegant. The cameras were getting all of this. Every word, every casual admission, every arrogant grin. Sounds complicated, I said. It's necessary, Raymond corrected. In this city, you either adapt or you get eaten. I adapted. And now you're going to adapt, or... He shrugged, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. Or what? Or we have a problem. And trust me, Ward, you don't want problems with me. I sipped my drink and thought about the cameras recording every frame of his smug face, about Jax watching from his apartment, and probably recording additional commentary, about Lana organizing everything into neat legal files, about Agent Ray waiting for the call. I'll think about it, I said. Raymond's grin got wider. That's smart. You think about it. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. He left, his tree trunk companion following like a shadow. The bar felt cleaner after they were gone, like opening windows after someone's been smoking inside. I pulled out my phone, looked at the camera feeds Jax had given me access to. Crystal clear footage of Raymond admitting to shell companies, money laundering, extortion. Got you, I said to the empty bar. The joke, as it turned out, was definitely on him. Raymond came back exactly 1 week later, which showed a surprising amount of restraint for a guy who basically operated on the principle of, I want it now, and I want it with a side of intimidation. I'd expected him to show up the next day, all impatient and pushy, but no, he waited a full 7 days, probably to let me think about it, like he'd suggested, as if I was actually going to spend a week contemplating whether I wanted to hand over 55% of my business to a corrupt cop with a god complex and a smile that could curdle milk. It was a Wednesday evening, because apparently Wednesday was the universal day for bad things happening in my life. The bar was moderately busy, not packed, but enough people that Raymond's entrance would have an audience, which I suspect was exactly what he wanted. Eddie was there, arguing with Marcus about whether Tom Brady was actually a system quarterback or genuinely talented. Rita was on her phone, probably swiping left on some poor guy whose only crime was having a fish picture in his dating profile. A couple of tourists were by the jukebox trying to figure out if any of the songs were from this decade. Spoiler, they weren't. The door opened with that familiar squeak, except this time it sounded less like bad luck and more like inevitability. Raymond walked in with his full crew this time, the original 4 guys in their discount leather jackets, plus tree trunk neck guy from last week, plus 2 additional men who looked like they'd failed the police academy physical exam, but made up for it with enthusiasm for questionable activities. 7 guys total. Raymond really wanted to make an impression. They spread out across the bar in a formation that was probably supposed to look tactical, but really just looked like they'd watched too many cop shows and thought standing near exits made them look professional. Raymond himself headed straight for the bar, moving with that particular swagger of someone who thinks they've already won and is just here to collect their prize. Ward, he said, settling onto the same stool he'd occupied last week. Time's up. Decision time. You in, or are we doing this the hard way? The cameras were rolling. All of them. Jax had sent me a text 10 minutes ago that just said, ITS showtime, with about 14 exclamation points and a gif of someone eating popcorn. Lana was on standby with Agent Ray, both of them waiting for my signal. Miriam and Tomas were parked outside in Miriam's car with their recording equipment and what I could only assume was an unhealthy amount of caffeine. Everything was ready. The stage was set. All I had to do was let Raymond be Raymond. I thought about your offer, I said slowly, like I was actually considering it. 55% seems steep. Raymond's grin was all predator. 55% of something is better than 100% of nothing, which is what you'll have after we're done with you. We can make your life very difficult, Ward. Evidence has a funny way of appearing. Health inspectors have a funny way of finding violations. The fire marshal might discover your wiring isn't up to code. These things happen. These things happen, I repeated. Just like that. Just like that. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret, except his crew could definitely still hear him, and so could every camera in the building. Here's what you don't understand. This city runs on arrangements. Everybody pays somebody. The restaurants pay, the clubs pay, the bookies and the dealers and the guys running card games in basement apartments. They all pay. You're not special. You're just another business that needs to understand how things work. And you're the guy who explains it? I'm the guy who makes it happen. He gestured around the bar like he was surveying his kingdom. You've got a good thing here. Decent location, regular customers, those cash events you've been running. Smart operation. We respect that. We want to help you keep it. For 55%. For peace of mind. Raymond's smile got wider. Think of it as insurance. You pay your premium, and nothing bad happens. You don't pay well. He shrugged. Accidents. One of his crew, the guy with the scorpion tattoo that still looked like an angry shrimp, cracked his knuckles for emphasis. It sounded like Rice Krispies, but more threatening. I need to think about it, I said, playing out the scene. You've had a week to think. Raymond's voice got harder, the friendly facade cracking just enough to show the ugliness underneath. This is the last conversation we're having. Either you agree right now, or we walk out of here, and tomorrow morning you wake up to a world of shit. Tax audit, health inspection, anonymous tips about illegal gambling, drug dealing, whatever we feel like making stick. Your bar gets shut down, you get arrested, and nobody believes the guy trying to claim a cop set him up. You understand. There it was. Clear, direct, undeniable extortion with a side of threats. Raymond had just handed me everything I needed on a silver platter, gift-wrapped with his own arrogance. I pulled out my phone slowly, watching Raymond's expression shift from confident to confused to wary. His hand drifted toward his gun, just slightly, just enough that the cameras would catch it. What are you doing? Raymond asked. Making a call. I pressed one button. Speed dial. The most important speed dial of my life. The phone rang once. Agent Ray picked up. I didn't even need to say anything specific. We'd rehearsed this. But I said it anyway, loud enough for everyone to hear. Calm as a Sunday morning when you've got nowhere to be and nothing to worry about. You've got 90 seconds to get out. The bar went quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the moment, the current song fading out into silence like it didn't want to interrupt a good scene. Eddie stopped mid-argument. Rita looked up from her phone. The tourists froze with their drinks halfway to their mouths. Raymond's grin flickered like a light bulb with loose wiring. What? 90 seconds. I repeated, glancing at my watch. A nice touch, very dramatic. I was proud of it. Actually, 87 now. Time flies when you're committing multiple felonies. You threatening me? Raymond's voice had an edge to it now, the confidence draining like water from a bathtub with a pulled plug. You're threatening a police officer? That's a crime, Ward. That's a serious crime. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm giving you a heads up. Professional courtesy, really. One of his crew shifted nervously. Tree trunk neck guy looked at Raymond like he was waiting for instructions. Scorpion tattoo guy's hand was shaking slightly, which would have been funny if the situation wasn't so tense. 80 seconds, I said helpfully. The first siren was distant, just a faint wail in the background like someone's car alarm going off 3 blocks away. But it was there, and it was getting closer. Raymond's expression changed. The predatory grin vanished completely, replaced by something that looked an awful lot like a man doing rapid mental calculations and not liking the results. What did you do? Me? I run a bar. I serve drinks. I mind my business. I poured myself a bourbon, neat, because I'm not an animal, and took a slow sip. You're the one who came in here threatening people, bragging about shell companies and money laundering and all those interesting arrangements you've got set up around the city. You recorded. He cut himself off, but the damage was done. The admission hung in the air like smoke. 70 seconds. More sirens now. Multiple sirens, coming from different directions, the sound building like a symphony warming up. Raymond's crew was definitely nervous now, shooting looks at each other and at the exits and at Raymond like they were waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Somewhere across town, Jax was watching this unfold on his monitors, probably recording his own commentary like a sports announcer covering the game of the century. Agent Ray was in motion, federal badges and warrants, and the kind of authority that made local cops very, very nervous. Miriam and Tomas were getting their cameras ready, preparing to document everything for the morning edition and the evening news, and probably their Pulitzers. I'd planned this moment so carefully that the timer on my phone felt like a metronome, keeping time for revenge and justice, measuring out the seconds until Raymond Hale's carefully constructed empire of corruption came crashing down around his ears. Every detail, every contingency, every possible way this could go wrong. I'd thought about it all during those long nights of organizing files and checking camera angles and making sure the evidence was absolutely airtight. "You set me up," Raymond said, and he sounded almost impressed, like he was recognizing a fellow player in the game. "You set yourself up," I corrected. "I just gave you the rope and watched you build the scaffold. Are you resisting arrest?" Raymond asked, his hand definitely on his gun now. "Because I can arrest you right now for threatening an officer, for interfering with police business, for 45 seconds. The sirens were loud now. Really loud. The kind of loud that meant multiple vehicles and serious intent. Rita had her phone out, recording. Eddie was watching with the kind of fascination people reserve for car crashes and reality TV finales. The tourists looked confused but invested, like they'd accidentally stumbled into the most interesting part of their vacation. I wanted to tell Raymond, "No, I'm not resisting arrest. I'm resisting having my life stolen by someone who needs a lesson in humility." I wanted to deliver a whole speech about justice and accountability and how badges don't make you bulletproof. But instead, I just poured another drink, because you're never too old for theatrics, and sometimes silence is more powerful than words. 30 seconds. Raymond stood up, his crew closing in around him like they were preparing for a siege. His face had gone from confident to worried to something approaching panic, and it was the most honest expression I'd seen from him yet. The siren stopped right outside. "Time's up," I said. The door opened, and Raymond's entire world changed. Unmarked cars have a very specific look to them, even when they're trying to be subtle. They're too clean, too generic, too, "I'm definitely not a cop" car, in a way that screams they're absolutely cop cars. 3 of them pulled up outside my bar like a coordinated dance routine, parking in formation that blocked the street and probably violated about 6 traffic laws that nobody was going to ticket them for. The room held its breath, and I mean everyone, even the tourists who just wanted a quiet drink and some authentic local atmosphere, not front row seats to what was quickly becoming the most interesting Wednesday night in recent memory. The door opened, and Agent Marcus Ray walked in like someone who'd rehearsed kindness once, found it lacking, and decided to go with professional intimidation instead. He was still in that expensive suit, still had that expression that suggested he'd seen humanity at its worst, and wasn't particularly surprised anymore. Behind him came a parade of federal agents and internal affairs investigators, all wearing jackets with those big yellow letters that make it very clear they're not here to ask politely about anything. There were a lot of them, more than I'd expected, honestly. Agent Ray had brought the entire cavalry, along with what appeared to be their cousins, and maybe a few people from accounting who wanted to see what field work looked like. They filled the doorway, spread out across the bar, positioned themselves at exits like they were preparing for Raymond to suddenly develop superpowers and try to fly through the ceiling. Raymond's face went through about 17 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, anger, fear, calculation, and finally landing on something that looked like a poker player who just realized his bluff got called and his opponent has a royal flush. His hand was still on his gun, which was a spectacularly bad idea, given that he was currently outnumbered by federal agents approximately 4-1. "Detective Hale," Agent Ray said, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority that doesn't need to be loud to be effective. "I'm Agent Marcus Ray, FBI. I'm going to need you to remove your hand from your weapon and place both hands where I can see them." Raymond did not do this. Instead, he reached for his badge like a man reaching for a bad joke he thinks will save him, pulling it out and holding it up like it was some kind of magical talisman that granted immunity from consequences. "I'm a police detective. There's been a misunderstanding. This man," he gestured at me with his badge, which was honestly kind of funny, "has been making false accusations, and I came here to extort him," Agent Ray interrupted smoothly. "To threaten him with fabricated evidence unless he paid you 55% of his profits. To brag about your money laundering operation involving shell companies, specifically Triborough Solutions, and your network of relatives who sign documents without asking questions. Should I continue?" Or would you like me to wait until your lawyer arrives to hear the rest? The color drained from Raymond's face so fast I was briefly concerned he might pass out right there on my freshly mopped floor. That would have been embarrassing for everyone involved. You can't, Raymond started. We have recordings, Agent Ray said calmly. Multiple recordings from multiple cameras, with timestamps and metadata. We have financial records showing wire transfers that match your described operations. We have testimony from witnesses. We have enough evidence to keep a grand jury busy for several weeks. He paused, letting that sink in. And you provided most of it yourself about 15 minutes ago, which was very helpful. Saved us a lot of paperwork. Raymond whispered. You set me up, and he was looking at me now, his expression a mixture of betrayal and grudging respect, like he was recognizing a fellow player in a game he thought only he knew how to play. I shrugged, sipping my bourbon because the situation called for casual nonchalance, and I'd been practicing. You set yourself up, I said. I just gave you a stage and let you perform. One of the federal agents, a woman who looked like she could bench press a small car and enjoyed doing paperwork in her spare time, stepped forward with handcuffs. Detective Hale, you're under arrest for extortion, conspiracy to commit money laundering, abuse of authority, and about 8 other charges that are going to be filed once we finish processing everything. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights, Raymond snapped, but his voice cracked slightly. The invincible detective was cracking right along with it. They cuffed him by the beer taps he'd once claimed as his perch, the ones he'd leaned against while threatening to destroy my life over money he thought he was entitled to. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in months. Better than the jukebox, better than the clink of glasses, better than anything. Raymond's crew. Those 6 guys in their discount leather and false bravado, scattered like napkins in a wind tunnel, trying to edge toward exits only to find federal agents blocking every possible escape route. Tree trunk neck guy made it approximately 4 steps before an agent roughly the size of a refrigerator stepped in front of him and said, "Going somewhere?" Scorpion tattoo guy actually tried to run for the back exit and made it into the hallway before discovering that 2 more agents had come in through the kitchen. The rest of Raymond's crew just froze, hands up, looking at each other like they were collectively trying to figure out whose idea this whole operation had been in the first place. Anyone else here part of Detective Hale's operation? Agent Ray asked the room at large. Now would be a good time to identify yourselves. Cooperation tends to look favorable when prosecutors are deciding who to charge with what. 3 of Raymond's crew immediately started talking, tripping over each other's words in their rush to explain that they were just following orders. They didn't know the full extent of what was happening. They had families and mortgages and really couldn't afford to go to prison for someone else's crimes. It was like watching rats desert a sinking ship, except the rats were wearing leather jackets and the ship was Raymond's entire criminal enterprise. My regulars were watching this unfold with the kind of fascination usually reserved for particularly good reality TV or highway accidents you can't look away from. Eddie had his phone out, probably texting his fantasy football league about this development. Rita was filming on Instagram Live, providing color commentary like a sports announcer. And there he goes, the corrupt cop getting what he deserves. And oh, one of his goons just tried to run and failed spectacularly. Marcus had a quiet smile on his face, the kind of smile healthcare workers get when they watch terrible people face consequences for terrible actions. Then Miriam and Tomas burst through the door with their cameras and recording equipment and the kind of journalistic excitement that probably kept them awake at night dreaming of Pulitzer Prizes. Miriam went straight for Agent Ray, already asking questions about charges and timeline, and whether this was connected to other investigations. Tomas was filming Raymond being let out in handcuffs, his camera capturing every moment of the detective's humiliation for posterity and the morning news. "Liam," Miriam called out, "can we get a statement?" "The bar is open for business," I said. "Drinks are half price for anyone who just witnessed a federal arrest." The tourists cheered. Eddie laughed. Rita updated her Instagram caption to include the drink special. Agent Ray finished supervising Raymond's arrest and walked over to me, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes suggesting he was at least mildly impressed. "That was good work, Mr. Ward. Risky but good. Is it still risky if you plan for every contingency?" "Yes," he said flatly. "Yes, it is." "Well, then I'm a risk taker." Someone should put that on my tombstone. Let's hope that's not necessary anytime soon. Ray glanced around the bar, at the cameras he now knew were there, at the regulars who were already turning this into a story they'd tell for years. You know this isn't over, right? There'll be trials, testimony, depositions. Raymond's lawyer will come after you. His friends on the force might make things difficult. I figured. And you did it anyway. He threatened my bar? I said simply. Nobody threatens my bar. Ray almost smiled. Almost. For what it's worth, you probably just helped us take down a corruption network that's been operating for at least 5 years. There are a lot of people who are going to sleep better tonight knowing Raymond Hale can't hurt them anymore. That should have felt triumphant. It should have felt like victory, like justice served with a side of vindication. And parts of it did. Watching Raymond get hauled away in handcuffs was satisfying in a way I couldn't quite articulate. But there was also something else, something heavier sitting in my chest like a stone. I felt relief, sure. But I also felt a surprising sadness for the man who used to be someone I called friend, back before he married my ex-wife and decided that badges were licenses for corruption instead of responsibility. Raymond had been a good cop once, or at least I'd thought he was. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost the plot, started believing his own hype, convinced himself that the rules didn't apply to people with enough power and connections. The bar slowly returned to normal, or whatever normal looked like after a federal arrest interrupted happy hour. The jukebox started playing again, someone having fed at quarters, and selected a song that felt appropriately dramatic. My regulars settled back into their spots, already beginning the process of turning this into legend. The tourists were definitely going to leave 5-star Yelp reviews. I poured myself another bourbon and sat down at stool 3, Sophie's old spot, and tried to figure out how I felt about everything. Victorious? Maybe. Guilty? A little. Tired? Absolutely. Ready for my life to go back to being boring? Yeah, that sounded pretty good actually. The papers ate Raymond for breakfast, and let me tell you, they didn't use silverware. They went full piranha, tearing into the story with the kind of enthusiasm journalists usually reserve for political scandals involving exotic animals or politicians caught doing something monumentally stupid on camera. By Thursday morning, Raymond Hale's face was plastered across every newspaper in the city, and not in the local hero cop saves kitten way. More like the corrupt detective gets what's coming to him, way that makes people choke on their coffee and immediately text their friends. Miriam's article hit the Metro Daily's front page above the fold, which she informed me was a big fucking deal in journalism terms. The headline read, Detective's Downfall. FBI arrests local cop in bar extortion sting, and the subheading was something about corruption networks and abuse of power. She'd written it with the kind of restrained fury that comes from months of investigating something and finally getting to publish the truth. Every paragraph was a surgical strike. Facts, quotes, documentation, all arranged in a way that made Raymond look exactly as guilty as he was. The article included details about Triborough Solutions, the shell companies, the wire transfers to Patricia Mendez, the substitute teacher, who probably had no idea her name was being used to launder money. Miriam had gotten quotes from Agent Ray about ongoing investigations into systemic corruption, which was fancy federal speak for were coming for everyone connected to this mess. She'd even included a timeline showing Raymond's rise through the police department alongside some very suspicious financial activity that didn't match his salary. The best part? She quoted me. Mr. Ward declined to comment extensively, but noted that the bar is open for business and drinks are half price for anyone who witnessed a federal arrest. It made me sound either heroic or deeply unserious, and I honestly couldn't tell which. Tomas took a different approach. His piece went up online within hours of the arrest, complete with video footage, audio recordings, and snarky captions that had way too many exclamation marks for something that was supposed to be journalism. Dirty cop gets caught in his own trap, the headline screamed, followed by, "You won't believe what he said on camera," which made it sound like a clickbait article about celebrity gossip instead of a serious investigation into police corruption. But it worked. The article went viral. Actually viral. Not just my aunt shared it on Facebook, viral, but trending on Twitter for 6 hours, viral. People were sharing the recordings of Raymond bragging about his shell companies and threatening me with fabricated evidence. Someone made a meme of Raymond's face right when he realized he was being arrested, captioned, when you realize you've played yourself. It got 40,000 likes in 3 hours. Social media did its job with the efficiency of a well-oiled outrage machine. Outraged, outraged, and then outraged with increasingly creative memes. There were TikToks about it, Instagram infographics explaining money laundering to teenagers who probably didn't care but watched anyway, Reddit threads dissecting every detail of the case with the intensity of people solving a murder mystery. Someone even made a Spotify playlist called Songs to Get Arrested To, Raymond Hale Edition, that included Bad Boys by Inner Circle, I Fought the Law by The Clash, and for some reason, All Star by Smash Mouth, which didn't really fit thematically but got included anyway because the internet has no quality control. The mayor issued a statement about how he was deeply troubled by these allegations and committed to rooting out corruption wherever it exists, which was politician speak for, "Please don't ask me how this happened under my watch." The police commissioner looked exhausted in his press conference, promising a full internal review, while probably wondering how many other cops in his department were running similar operations. My regulars started calling me the bartender who did a thing, which was possibly the lamest superhero nickname in history. Eddie introduced me to his fantasy football league buddies as the guy who took down that corrupt cop, which made me sound way cooler than I actually was. Rita told everyone on her dating apps that she personally knew the hero bartender from the news, which I discovered when 3 different guys showed up asking if I was the person from the articles and could they buy me a drink in my own bar. "You're famous," Rita announced one evening, showing me her phone where someone had created a fan account for me on Instagram. The account had posted the video of Raymond getting arrested with heart eye emojis and the caption, "Justice served hot and fresh." It had 8,000 followers. "That's deeply weird," I said. "That's modern celebrity," Rita corrected. "Embrace it. Monetize it. Start a podcast." "I'm not starting a podcast. Everyone has a podcast now. You could talk about taking down corrupt cops, give advice, interview other people who've fought the system." "Rita, I'm not starting a podcast." "Your loss. That's money on the table." But not everyone was applauding and making memes. Some people, and there's always some people, muttered that I'd crossed a line, played judge and jury, taken the law into my own hands like some kind of vigilante with a liquor license. I heard the whispers, caught the side eye from certain customers who thought what I'd done was technically legal but morally questionable, or some other philosophical bullshit that people say when they're uncomfortable with consequences happening to people they vaguely know. A guy named Paul, regular customer, always ordered IPAs and complained about them being too hoppy even though he kept ordering them, cornered me by the bar one night. "You know, what you did to Raymond was pretty messed up," he said, nursing his too hoppy IPA. "You set him up. Entrapped him." "He set himself up," I replied, which was becoming my standard response. "I just recorded him doing it." "Still, you played judge and jury. That's not your job. Neither is letting corrupt cops extort my business, but here we are." Paul frowned into his beer like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I'm just saying, man, 2 wrongs don't make a right." "No, but 1 right can stop a whole bunch of wrongs from continuing," I said. Raymond wasn't going to stop with me. There were other people, other businesses. The only reason nobody stood up to him before is because they were scared, or they didn't have evidence, or they figured it was easier to just pay up and hope he'd go away. Maybe. Paul didn't sound convinced. "Still feels like vigilante justice." "Then it's a good thing I didn't do any vigilante justice," I said patiently. "I collected evidence and turned it over to federal authorities who conducted a legal arrest based on recorded confessions of actual crimes. That's not vigilantism. That's citizenship with extra steps." Lana showed up later that week, looking slightly less exhausted than usual, which meant she was only running on 4 cups of coffee instead of her usual 7. She settled onto a stool and ordered a glass of wine that she proceeded to stare at like it had offended her ancestors. "You okay?" I asked. "I've been getting calls," she said. Other people Raymond shook down. Other businesses that paid his protection fees, or whatever he was calling them. They're coming forward now, wanting to press charges, wanting their money back, wanting justice. She took a sip of wine, which is good. Great, even. But it's also reminding me that laws are messy, and sometimes people confuse justice with spectacle. "You think I created a spectacle? I think you did what you had to do, and it worked, and now everyone's watching to see what happens next." Lana swirled her wine thoughtfully. Just be careful. The spotlight's great until it burns you. People love a hero until they decide you're not heroic enough, or you're too heroic, or you did the heroic thing wrong. So basically, I can't win. Welcome to being a human in society, Lana said dryly. We're all just stumbling around hoping we don't accidentally become the villain in someone else's story. That night, after most of the customers had cleared out and it was just me, Eddie, and a couple of late-night stragglers who were still debating whether Raymond would actually serve prison time or get off with probation and a slap on the wrist, I decided to tell a joke. It seemed appropriate. The whole situation was absurd enough that it needed some levity, even if the levity landed awkwardly. So a cop, a bartender, and a bad accountant walk into a bar. I started. Eddie looked up. Is this going where I think it's going? The cop says, I need 55% of your profits or I'll arrest you. The bartender says, I'm going to record you saying that. And the bad accountant says, can someone explain money laundering to me because I genuinely don't understand these wire transfers. There was a pause. Then Eddie laughed, not a big laugh, but enough of one to show he appreciated the effort. One of the stragglers chuckled. The other one looked confused. That's a terrible joke, Rita called from her spot by the window where she was still trying to figure out if her Tinder match was a catfish. It's a work in progress, I admitted. The city felt slightly cleaner after Raymond's arrest, like when you clean one shelf in your house and suddenly notice how dusty everything else is. The corruption wasn't gone. It never is, not really, but at least one piece of it had been removed, sent to federal holding to await trial, and probably a lengthy prison sentence. Other investigations were opening up, other cops were getting nervous, other people who'd thought they were untouchable were suddenly checking their bank records and consulting lawyers. It wasn't a complete victory. It wasn't even close to fixing everything wrong with the system. But it was something. And sometimes, something is enough. Here's what nobody tells you about being the guy who takes down a corrupt cop. You get headlines, sure, but you also get sleepless nights that stretch on like bad highway traffic with no end in sight. You get phone calls from people you haven't talked to in years, some congratulating you, some telling you you're an asshole, and some just wanting to know if the story they read online was actually true or exaggerated for clicks. You get recognized at the grocery store by strangers who either want to shake your hand or give you dirty looks while you're just trying to buy eggs and cereal like a normal human being. The first week after Raymond's arrest was fine, great, even. I was riding high on that adrenaline rush of having done something that mattered, of having stood up to a bully with a badge and won. I slept like a baby that first night, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep you get after finishing something difficult. The bar was busier than usual, full of curious people and regulars who wanted to rehash every detail of the arrest like it was a sports game we were analyzing for strategic plays. The second week was when things got complicated. I started getting calls. Not the good kind. The kind where people congratulate you and tell you you're a hero, but the uncomfortable kind where people from your past resurface like bodies in a lake and remind you that life is messy and everyone has opinions about everything you do. My cousin Jennifer called me on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., which should be illegal. She launched into a speech about family reputation and how my little stunt had made things awkward at her book club because one of the members was married to a cop, and now everyone was asking Jennifer if her cousin was anti-police or one of those activist types. I let her talk for about 4 minutes before I interrupted to remind her that I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, and her opinion about my life choices ranked somewhere below what strangers think about my shoe selection. She hung up on me. I made coffee and tried not to feel guilty about it. My former construction foreman, Big Mike, called to tell me I was playing with fire and that cops have long memories and I should watch my back. This was less threatening than it sounds. Big Mike was genuinely worried. In that gruff way guys who work construction their whole lives express concern by predicting your imminent doom. I appreciated it, sort of, but it also made me realize that a lot of people expected Raymond's friends to come after me with some kind of revenge plot. They didn't, for the record. Turns out when you arrest someone with video evidence of them committing multiple felonies, their friends tend to distance themselves pretty quickly because nobody wants to be associated with the sinking ship. But the paranoia lingered. I started checking my car for tampering every morning, looking over my shoulder when I walked home at night, jumping slightly every time someone came into the bar wearing a leather jacket. Then there were the people who called to confess things. This was the weirdest category. Apparently, once you become known as the guy who took down a corrupt cop, people assume you're some kind of vigilante hotline they can call with their own stories of injustice. A woman named Martha called to tell me about a contractor who'd ripped her off 6 years ago, and could I do my thing and get her money back? A guy named Steve wanted me to investigate his ex-wife's new boyfriend who he was pretty sure was involved in something illegal, but couldn't actually articulate what. I'm a bartender. I serve drinks and listen to people's problems and occasionally take down corrupt cops when they threaten my livelihood. I'm not Batman. I don't have a cave or a signal or a butler named Alfred who helps me solve crimes. I told these people to contact actual authorities or lawyers or therapists depending on what their situation actually required. Some of them got mad. Apparently, being a hero means you're supposed to help everyone all the time forever, and declining makes you a hypocrite or something. The worst call came on a Thursday afternoon when I was restocking beer and trying to remember if I'd ordered enough limes for the weekend. My phone rang with a number I recognized immediately even though I'd deleted it from my contacts months ago. Sophie. I stared at the phone for 3 rings, debating whether answering was going to make my day better or worse. Curiosity won. It usually does. Liam, she said, and her voice had that careful tone people use when they're trying to sound casual about something that's definitely not casual. I saw the news. About Raymond. Yeah, that happened. Are you happy? She asked, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. Anger? Sadness? Confusion? All of the above mixed together like a cocktail nobody ordered? I'm tired, I said honestly. And happy sounds expensive. There was a pause. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then, you destroyed his life. He tried to destroy mine first. I just defended myself with better documentation. He's in federal custody, Liam. He's going to prison. His career is over. Everything he worked for was built on corruption and extortion. I interrupted. He wasn't some noble cop who made one mistake. He was running a whole operation, shaking down businesses across the city. The only reason you didn't know about it is because you didn't want to know. Another pause. This one felt heavier, like the weight of everything unsaid between us was pressing down on the phone line. I called to ask if you were happy, Sophie said finally, because I needed to know if this was worth it to you. If revenge tasted as good as you thought it would. It wasn't about revenge, wasn't it? She didn't sound angry anymore. Just sad. Tired. Like someone who'd just realized something disappointing about someone they used to care about. You could have just paid him, or closed the bar, or reported him without turning it into a whole operation with cameras and recordings and federal agents. But you went all in because some part of you wanted to hurt him the way you felt hurt when I left. That stung because it had just enough truth in it to be painful. Maybe, I admitted. Maybe there was some of that. But Sophie? He threatened to plant evidence on me. He threatened to destroy my business, my life, everything I'd built. So yeah, maybe I wanted him to face consequences. Maybe I wanted him to feel what it's like when someone takes everything from you. Does that make me a bad person? I don't know, Sophie said quietly. I don't know what it makes you. Well, when you figure it out, let me know. I didn't mean for it to sound bitter, but it came out that way anyway. She hung up. I stood there in my stockroom surrounded by cases of beer and boxes of bar napkins, feeling like I'd just lost an argument I hadn't realized I was having. The guilt was there, had been there since the moment Raymond got cuffed, sitting in my chest like a dull stone wedged somewhere between my ribs. I'd hurt a man I used to admire, or at least a man I'd thought I admired back before I knew what he really was. Raymond and I had been friends once, in that casual way men are friends when they're married to people who are friends. We'd had beers together, watched games, made small talk about sports and weather and other safe topics that don't require emotional vulnerability. I'd taken him down, deliberately, methodically, with planning and cameras and federal agents. I destroyed his career, his reputation, probably his marriage to Sophie whenever she got around to processing what her husband actually was. And yeah, he deserved it. Legally, morally, by any reasonable standard of justice, he absolutely deserved to face consequences for what he'd done. But that didn't make it feel simple. Some people won't forgive me for what I did. Some people will call me a hero and then forget the details a week later because it's less work than staying invested. Some people will think I'm a snitch, a rat, someone who broke some unwritten code about not turning on your own. Except Raymond was never my own, and the code he followed was written in corruption and threats. I had to accept something sitting there in my stockroom having an unscheduled emotional crisis. I had hurt a man I used to know. I had taken down a life that used to be connected to mine in messy, complicated ways involving ex-wives and shared history and all those ties that don't sever cleanly. The guilt was real, and it wasn't going away just because I was technically in the right. But I also kept my bar. I kept my dignity. I kept the truth in a folder with timestamps and authentication and sent copies to people who would make sure it mattered. I proved that badges don't make you immune to consequences, that corruption doesn't pay in the long run, that sometimes the little guy wins if he plans carefully enough and documents everything and gets really lucky with his timing. And yes, I kept the joke book on the shelf, because people need to laugh when everything else is heavy, and sometimes humor is the only thing standing between you and a complete breakdown in the beer cooler. That night, Eddie found me sitting at the bar nursing a bourbon and probably looking like I was auditioning for a role in a movie about sad bartenders reflecting on their life choices. "You okay, man?" he asked, settling onto his usual stool. "Define okay. Not having an existential crisis at your own bar? Then no, I'm not okay." Eddie nodded like this made perfect sense. "You did a good thing. It doesn't always feel good when you do good things. That's why most people don't bother. Too complicated, too messy. Easier to just let bad stuff happen and pretend it's not your problem." "Thanks. That's very comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to remind you that you're not crazy for feeling weird about this." He ordered his usual beer. "You took down a corrupt cop. That's significant. But you also ruined someone's life, even if that someone was a garbage person who deserved it. Both things can be true at the same time. When did you become wise? Fantasy football teaches you about the complexity of human decision-making," Eddie said seriously. "Also, my therapist says I need to validate people's feelings more, so I'm practicing on you." I laughed despite myself. "Your therapist sounds smart." "She is. You should get one. I have bourbon and a joke book." "That's practically the same thing." "It's definitely not, but okay." A week later, the city moved on because that's what cities do. They chew through drama like a wood chipper through branches, spitting out the pieces and immediately looking for the next thing to consume. Raymond's arrest became old news, replaced by a mayoral scandal involving misappropriated funds and a reality TV star nobody had heard of doing something stupid at a nightclub downtown. The news cycle is relentless and has the attention span of a goldfish on energy drinks. The bar hummed like an old engine that finally got its oil changed. The jukebox played a happy, sad song that fit my mood perfectly, something about endings and new beginnings and other poetic nonsense that sounds profound at 2 in the morning. No one threw me a parade, which was fine because parades are loud and involve coordinating with city officials who probably still weren't thrilled about the whole exposing corruption thing. No one handed me a trophy with my name engraved, no key to the city, no official recognition beyond a few articles and some memes that would be forgotten by next Tuesday. But I sat at stool 3, Sophie's old spot, with a modest bourbon and felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly, but something close to it. Acceptance, maybe. The understanding that I'd done what needed doing and the consequences were what they were. Revenge wasn't a bullet or a dramatic confrontation scored by orchestral music. It was a tiny, perfectly timed phone call and a stack of authenticated files. It was proving that badges don't make you bulletproof, that corruption has an expiration date, that sometimes the little guy wins if he's stubborn enough and documents everything twice. Raymond got handcuffs and federal charges. I got sleep eventually, though it took a few weeks and maybe some therapy that Eddie's therapist recommended. The bar stayed mine. Sophie married a detective who preferred laundering money to doing his actual job, which would have been funnier if it wasn't so sad. Life is messy like that, but sometimes messy clears space for new things. I locked the door that night, walked home under streetlights that pretended they were stars, and thought, if justice has a sense of humor, it's very dry. If not, well, at least the bourbon tasted good.